Thank you all for joining us for this presentation. I'll introduce the speaker to all of you, and then we will have a sort of a presentation where Professor Bhalla has agreed can be a conversation, so you can ask your questions during the presentation. So let me quickly introduce Professor Bhalla. Dr. Manaswini Bhalla is an associate professor in the economics and social sciences area at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Her primary area of interest lies in information economics with a focus on the role of identity and networks in business. She uses empirical and game theoretic tools in her research. In a series of working papers, she is exploring the role of culture on economic outcomes in the context of corporate bonds, entrepreneurship, legal system, and real estate. In the field of pricing, her work explores the use of prices and other instruments by firms to influence the learning process of consumers to their advantage. Some of her work in this area have been published in journals like Journal of Economic Theory and Journal of Industrial Economics. The co-author of, she has 3 co-authors for this particular paper she's presenting. Professor Suresh Bhagavatula from IIM Bangalore, Professor Manisha Goel from Pune College, and Professor Balagopal Bisa from INSEAD, Singapore. So yes, Manaswini, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Rohan and Vidya and others for arranging this conversation. I'm very happy to present at Krea. I've heard very good things about Krea's undergraduate program, and hopefully one day we'll get a chance to engage with each other physically, face-to-face as well. So I'm happy to discuss and talk to you about this very first paper on diversity in corporate boards and firm outcomes. It's, as mentioned in the introduction, it's a first in the series of paper where Manisha and I are exploring the role of identity in business, particularly in India. In other papers, we look at how identity plays a role in mergers and acquisitions, within Indian mergers. In another paper with a co-author in UCST, we're looking at how does identity of firms, particularly caste, of those who enter, and the success of those firms that enter, how does that depend upon the caste of the politicians who win the election in that region. So this is a series of work, and like everything good, it's taken time, and hopefully we will be able to share soon that much of this work is getting published. All right, so I'll begin. Just a second. Okay, so diversity in corporate boards have been of interest quite lately, in fact, but over the period of time, it has, across the globe, it has gotten a lot of attention. And to give you an example, in 2008, Norway firms were, public and state-owned companies were asked to have 40% of their boards to be constituted by females. In 2013, Indian, the corporate law asked Indian firms, large public companies, to have at least 1 female director. Similarly, 2019, California, the public companies said that at least 1 female director should be there. Now, much prior work has, if you ask anybody, what does diversity mean to you? We will get several responses. And I would leave a thought with you too as to what do you understand by diversity? And most of the times, at least at the point in which we are in corporate boards, corporate world, is that diversity means gender. Have a gender balanced team, and that's diverse team. And that's the theme through which prior work has used, or you looked at diversity. But we all know that mindsets could differ due to different conditions around them, different cultural markers. And therefore, mindset diversity is more important, or at least is also important while we look at diversity with respect to gender. And to illustrate the point that it's not just about gender, one of the rules, one of the requirements of NASDAQ has been something that around 2019 or 20 they passed. They said that US firms must diversify their boards with at least one woman as well as one underrepresented minority. And by minority, they left it slightly open, saying race or sexual orientation. So quite acknowledging that mindset diversity often involves facets which are other than gender. And that's something that even, board, this is a UK board, guidelines on board effectiveness, a report council that said diversity goes beyond gender. It includes race, personal attributes, intellect, etc., and ability to listen and form relationships. So it's very tough for an economist to incorporate this concept of diversity because this is hard to measure, as you can think. And we make a small step towards this big challenge, which is that how to measure mindset diversity. And we do that by using a slightly unexplored and maybe controversial, if you may, instrument, which is your caste, which relates to, which actually relates to these deeply rooted conditionings of people around them. So the broad two questions that we ask are corporate boards culturally or culturally diverse? By cultural, we mean, or mindset, or is there mindset diversity in them? By that we mean, are they diverse with respect to caste and religion? And does mindset diversity on boards impact firm outcomes? And if it does, then how does it impact firm outcomes? So we are set, our studies set in India. I don't have to introduce India to you. And we use a very novel method, and I'm happy to talk to you about what we do, of identifying directors, religion, and caste. And that's something that we take deep pride, in sharing with you. And we also leave it open that, if this is of interest, we're happy to share this information for academic purposes only. And we document what are the different patterns of mindset diversity in Indian boards. And we ask ourselves the same question, that does diversity have an effect on firm performance? And our period of interest is about 16 years, from 1999 to 2015. This is a trend that we don't leave the results to the end in presentation. So I'm going to spill the beans and tell you what we find. We find that cultural homophily is high and persistent across all boards, and we also find that homophily or cultural homophily or caste homophily, it varies according to certain firm characteristics. I'm going to show you lots of figures here, which are directly from our research. And homophily, negatively, cultural homophily, which means lack of diversity, has an impact on firm performance. I'm happy to take questions here if there are any, if you have any thoughts on, but if not, then I can proceed.
Yeah, I think no questions so far.
No questions so far. Okay, I don't have to introduce caste to you. But I'm going to tell you how we do, how do we find castes of firms, of board of directors. And what we do is that we exploit matrimonial websites, information from there. Now, we all know that people, most of these websites are where the profiles are either made by the person interested or their family members, and they self-report their first name and then their last name, as well as their caste, right, their jati. And there is a reason why we should believe that they're going to truthfully reveal this information, is that this information, if not revealed accurately, can be costly to be on the market, because if you're revealing, you probably are interested in being on the market for, or at least marrying within the same caste, or do care about it, and hence reporting that accurately is of interest to you. So we got a data dump of some 6 million names and their self-identified jatis and religion. So I understand, I'm presuming that the audience is aware, it knows very well the concept of Varna and Jati. So
just one question from the
yes,
audience,
please.
Chandrasekharan Nagarajan.
Yeah.
He asks, I mean, you want to ask a question, Chandrasekharan? Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
I do.
Yeah. It includes all categories: executive,
Yes,
non-executive,
yes.
independent, nominee.
Yes, all.
Okay.
We look at all kinds
Most of the boards would have large size executive and non-executive directors.
Correct.
Who could have been also the part of the top management selection process.
Correct. So we do not discriminate there. And in fact, the ones who are executives could be, their nomination is kind of more endogenous to the firm and therefore the CEO of the firm. And we do kind of find relations, we try to show you that does this diversity of the firm with respect to caste vary with respect to the dominant caste of the CEO. So I show you those stuff. I will show you those stuff. Interestingly, the fact that you asked about executive, non-executive, different kinds of categories of directors, we also exploit a change in the law, which was clause 49, which required certain all firms at different points in time to change their number of independent directors with time, increase them particularly. And that was a very nice so-called natural experiment for us to know that there was a shock in the composition of the directors, which did not necessarily affect firm performance. So we wanted to see how does that shock have an impact on the caste composition, and then look at the firm performance. So I'm going to talk about that as well.
The study period you mentioned 1999 to 2015. Did I hear it right?
That's right. That's right.
So that is before this legislation came with respect to CB requirements as well as MCA requirement. It is before that.
No, not necessarily. It is kind of it is also before that as well as after, because 2006 and 7 was the one when it came.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it has both the periods. Okay, and it also includes all listed companies and their subsidiaries as well.
Mostly listed because our data set, mostly listed, and most of them are publicly listed companies.
Publicly listed companies are not necessarily subsidiaries, which will not be the subsidiary boards you may not have looked at.
So we use this data set, which is the prowess data set. That's publicly available.
Just matter of interest. That's all.
No problem. Yeah, good. Thank you for the questions, though. Yeah.
But we also do have situations where we can have subsidiaries or corporate groups that are listed, but the parent companies may not be listed, right? So, for example, we see that kind of holding structure with Tata Sons and all that.
So whatever is there, we do not discriminate between listed and non-listed. I can actually show you stuff too with respect to how does homophily change with respect to their size, and being listed is actually indicated of size as well. But I can also show you the results with respect to listed and not listed. We don't discriminate. As long as we have the information, we are fine. We don't discriminate. All right. So this is something that I thought would be of interest to you, which forms the backbone of our series of paper, where we have this data, data dump of some 6 million names. So imagine an Excel file with 6 million rows. You have their last names and their castes identified to it. Now so therefore we thought that why not use this to map the last names to their caste. But then the first thing that you will think about is that, well, that's a very challenging exercise because so many names can be spelled in so many different ways. right? For example, my co-author's name is Goyal, last name Goyal. It can also be spelled as Goel. It can be spelled as Goyala, and so on and so forth. So, for example, one of our audience's last name is Mishra. Some people may even write it as Misra, or so on and so forth. So there are different variations to it. So what we do is we use a machine learning algorithm, and we use two different methods to find last names which are similar sounding according to the pronunciations of Indian language, like Hindi language. So, and then that's a huge exercise that we did. And so we clubbed names. For example, Goyals of all kind will be all together, bunched together. So and therefore they will have one group name that they are Goyal. So Goyal will also have Goyala, Goel, etc., etc. We consider them as all together as one. So imagine that there are 100 such profiles across in this group, and each one of them would have indicated their jati. So of 100 last names, Goyal, 30 may have said that they are Kshatriya, 20 may have said that they are Khatris, 30 others would have said something else. So that gives us a probability distribution of last name to different jatis. So there is no one-to-one map. For example, a Singh, S-I-N-G, is not necessarily going to be Rajput. It could also be a Khatri, Kshatriya with certain probabilities. And those probabilities are not forced by us. It's just all completely data-driven. Whatever the dump is telling us, data is telling us, we do that. So we have 21,000 plus last names, 8 religions, 5 varnas. You will think that there are 4, but there are 5. We also look at Dalits, and 472 jatis. So I hope it was quite clear. How did we map? We have a probability distribution for last name. So basically, anyway, we use this in many cases. Wherever we have last names, we are able to map them to a caste and jati.
A lighter comment. Tamilians would not have last names.
Correct. Acknowledging that, we do acknowledge, we know that, sitting in South India, and we all acknowledge that. But still we can figure out, let's say Padmanabhans, certain names, if they are reporting what they are, then we can club them together, and then we can say that, okay, right, 30% of them say that they are Tamil Brahmins, etc., etc. So we don't meddle around, but we acknowledge that they may not be associated with their last names, but could be their father's name, could be their villages' names, etc., etc.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. So then we create a homophily index. I think all of you would know about this concentration ratio, the Herfindahl-Hirschman index. Now think about the concentration ratio of religions in a board. If you have 3 board members, each one of them, let's say if one is Hindu, 2 is Muslim, then we have this as their religion concentration. But if all board members are all Muslim, then the concentration ratio is 1. But we don't have one-to-one probability. We have a mapping, right? So we have a mapping. For example, let's say we have for one member who is with half likelihood Hindu and half likelihood Muslim. You will say that this is not likely. Trust me, it's possible, but instead of Hindu, Muslim, Christian, you can think about jatis or varnas, which is also quite likely. So with one member is half likelihood, like half probability of being Hindu, half of Muslim, and the other are with 1 probability Muslim, then we are looking at this board. We can think about this board as, with half likelihood, it's this board A, and with half likelihood, it is board B. And hence the so-called Blau index is just a probability distribution, like in a convex combination of the Blau of the 2 boards. Basically, there is some very nice way of figuring out their concentration ratio. So that in itself, it was a huge exercise because we had some 40,000 boards, and to kind of calculate, it was a very, very data intensive exercise. My daughter became 1 or 2, and still this paper was just about getting finished. And I'm hoping that before her 5th birthday, we will publish it.
That's not much time.
Yeah. No, this baby refuses to go. Anyway, so this is just some stats. Average homophily index with respect to religion, varna and jati across all boards is very high. Now you'll say, what do these numbers mean? Let me show you figures with respect to jati for you to understand what they mean. Think about boards in every year, and each board in every year has a board composition with respect to their jati, and hence a homophily index, a concentration index with respect to jati for each board. Now average it over all boards in a year, and that's the red line that you get. Sorry, that's the blue line that you get. The reality, what's there. Now, how do we know this is high? These numbers are not enough. So what we did was that let's simulate. Now, how do we simulate? We said, let's take any board in any year and consider, and instead of looking at the directors that are associated with that board in that year, let's give them random board members. Now, what does random board members mean? That pick all directors in that year that are board members and randomly assign this firm board members equal to the number of its board size. For example, if the board size was 5, forget about the board members that it actually has, nominate it or simulate and assign randomly some 5 board members of all the board members that are there. And then take the homophily, do this 100 times for every board and take the average. What do you get? You get this red line. So if you assign board members randomly without any prejudice to boards equal in size of that of their board size, and do that 100 times and take the average, then what you get is this red line, which is far less than the actual homophily.
Can I ask a question here?
Yes.
First Gaurav and then
Okay.
Shikhar, you can follow up.
Yeah, so Manaswini, my question was, can you give us some intuition as to, why your randomly simulated board compositions are varying over time, right? I mean, from 2010 onwards, it seems that homophily has increased quite significantly. So intuitively, why is that happening? What's happening in the data that leads to this higher level of homophily in the later part of your data set?
Are you asking for the trend itself? It could be that there's an influx of many new firms.
Okay.
With new technology, with new firms that led to more board of directors of a particular kind which are associated with new firms, and hence the pool that we were looking at, from which we were to actually randomly pick and assign to any firm, was of a particular kind. But if you simulate this 100 times or many times, you should be able to negate any kind of bias.
Precisely, that's what I mean. You would expect like a flat line, right? But it's not.
Even for it. So, but yes, what it does not account for, this part here, it does not account for is the fact that there could be a bias itself in the kind of pool of directors that we are getting. Pool of directors itself. Let's say all of us are Bengalis, for that matter. I know I can crack that joke with you. Oh, it's all of us are Bengalis, and it's 90% of them are Bengalis. Now, if you're going to pick, what if you're picking only 3 of them or 4 of them?
Yeah.
You're most likely going to get them only. But we account for that also in later stage.
Okay.
We control for that also.
But at this stage, then it means that maybe the boards were getting less diverse over time, which is why even your random sampling, your bootstrapping would lead to estimates which would.
But at least for sure, there's no such kind of inbuilt bias per se that we can say that it is. This picture is good enough to tell you that there is. It's so-called high. The homophily is high with respect to randomness. Mr. Chandrasekhar.
Yeah.
Chandrasekhar.
Yeah. Just wanted to understand one, you normalize for the size of the turnover and the asset.
We will do all of that when we run regressions.
Okay, not here at this point.
Here, this is just a simple exercise to understand.
Yeah.
What do you mean by high or low? This is
Okay.
not I mean, I will show you regressional results with respect to regression, where we control for form characteristics, even board characteristics. And all of these answers, still we get stuff which is different. Here, I'm just going to show you board. That result will tell you the relationship between diversity and firm performance.
Okay, because I think one of the fundamental assumption of simulation is the market is open and market forces operate in choice of directors. Well, which I think your observed data definitely shows it not to be so. I think that was one thing which, and also I see, as Gaurav also pointed out, 2009 onwards, the simulation clearly shows a difference, which you answered. Probably new breed of directors would have come, etc.
Correct.
But then should I understand then that there the market forces operated better? Was that those who came through MCA listing or something, you took it? Or you pulled the existing directors and went?
No, the latter, but it doesn't diminish our finding that firms are concentrated with respect to their board composition.
So the database is not MCA database or something?
No, it's not. But by the way, we use the MCA database for our project with respect to entry of firms. Okay. This database is directed mostly to do with the listed firms. MCA data set doesn't have board of directors mentioned, though we can map all of that and do, but progress is good.
And for simulation, you would have taken all directors who are also not part of the observed sample.
Exactly. Of not part of the firm's directorship. Okay. So, but then we also condition here. We condition for the so we simulate and pick directors only from the state in which the firm is instituted. Still, we get very surprising results that the homophily is quite high. Similarly, here we control and we simulate and pick directors and assign directors to firms randomly for the industry that they belong to. Still stuff similar. Same for Jati, Varna. And just some thoughts. These don't say much, but some idea about homophily across the country. I want to show you some more startling results, but yeah, here that it varies very randomly with respect to different industries, quite high with respect in arts, rather low with respect to information communication. We don't have to think anything more than just the fact that these are just numbers of for interest. Now, some figures, these are not results, but figures with respect to
just one question from my end. Have you done the same exercise with religion? Or is it just Jati and Varna?
Rohan, religion diversity is very low.
Very low, right.
Very low. Most of them are Hindus.
Right.
Religion diversity.
Essentially, so then this paper could be, I mean, your initial pitch was religion and Jati and caste, or caste, right? So then essentially because the caste paper for one religion.
Oh, but okay. We actually, I think we pitch it in this way, that there are many ways to look at identity. Bigger lens, smaller, smallest, and the lens matters, and it could might as well be because religion doesn't really, but given that we did it and we have results for it, but it doesn't vary that much that it's of great interest to see things which vary. I don't give you I cannot show you very interesting figures, but most of the relationships hold. But yeah, the idea is that the lens matters. That we shouldn't just think about identity from the point of view of caste only, but within caste also, you will be surprised to see that firms are concentrated with respect to a particular jati. and you throw this out on Twitter or anywhere else, and they will come back to you that certain institutions have become of a particular ideology. But trust me, this is completely unbiased inquiry. And that's
Was
it.
there any casual observation with respect to promoters' caste with the vote caste
I'm
index?
happy to share that information with you. I don't
Okay.
have those
Yeah,
slides.
yeah, it's only just for matter of academic understanding.
Most likely there will be a relationship.
Yeah, I thought
So
so.
I would like you to see these, that, what kind of firms are more likely to be diverse or less homophilous. And you will see that as the firm size increases, which means as you go from this first quartile to the other, diversity increases or homophily reduces. So as you become bigger, you are more likely to be more diverse and less homophily. So smaller firms observed with respect to asset sales or profits would say that. Similarly for age, as you are older, this was actually, to begin with, was a little bit of a surprise for us, that we thought that older firms would be more stubborn or restrictive, but not really. We find them to be more diverse.
I mean, in a way that kind of makes intuitive sense also, right? Because older firms, larger firms, they're going to have more employees. They've been around for a lot longer. They might appreciate the fact that diversity actually will help them with their.
Correct. So the argument goes in this way. I think older firms are there because they are surviving and hence they perform better. Therefore, they must be bigger, or they must be, bigger, and hence must be more diverse. So that's, you're right in that intuition.
Maybe they just realize the value of hiring on the basis of merit versus on the basis of kinship networks, perhaps.
Exactly. But you know what? We all think that kinship networks is taboo or bad. But for the younger firms, and this is a thought of thread which people like Kevin Munshi and many of our papers are actually trying to elude, that networks can actually be good and they reduce asymmetric information for many firms.
Yeah. Especially for smaller firms in the end, right? Because for smaller firms, you need to find, for example, each person you hire, each marginal person, I mean, their importance to the firm is vast. So you need to get it right. And to get it right, also what matters is competence, but also trust. And that's much more easy to find perhaps through a kinship network.
It's not very hard to find. There are these small clubs of firms, industry clusters based on certain castes. And that's primarily to promote firms which are actually trying to make it big. So exporters are also here, we find, more diverse. Group firms, which are bigger, are also more diverse. So typically we think group firms are family firms. No, but group firms which are bigger are also diverse. Now here comes some figures for Professor Chandrasekharan. I was asking governance and firm perform and homophily.
On two, just want to understand closely held firms versus widely held firms. Closely held versus widely held, dispersely held. The group firms may likely to be closely held, and I'm surprised with this result.
By closely held, you mean promoters, percentage of promoters?
Promoters, family, friends. And they bring on the professional investors.
So our reviewers also ask similar questions. But the sad part is that the information about promoters and whether is very sparse in the data set. So what we get shouldn't be taken too seriously. Also, the identity of whether they are family firms or non-family firms is very dubious. I don't know what it means to have family firms. I think promoterships are, if the promoters are of a particular family, up to a particular point, I think that is a good definition that they are family firms. But we don't have information of promoters that very much. We did the exercise, don't have the results here to show you.
Thank you.
So better governance, typically you think bigger board sizes would be better governed, and you get the same, that bigger board sizes, from board sizes have more diversity with respect to Jati. Some stuff here with respect to independent directors, the more independent directors that you have, lesser is your Jati homophily, more diverse. But you do see that what we're seeing here, we've aggregated over sectors because we cannot do it individually. It's the information that we have is not much because the independent directorship information as well as promoter information is sparse for us at this point in time. I mean, if this data is updated and somebody is willing to go and do this exercise again for 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
we will get something different. So, okay, so now to the second question quickly, how does board diversity affect firm performance? I mean, intuitively, if you think about it, how should diversity in any group have an impact? More diverse group would imply greater diverse ideas, and hence access to more information, so you should be able to perform better. But more diverse firm group may also mean greater degree of coordination required to engage in a conversation, or let's say lesser amount of trust to work together, and hence opposing impact on firm performance. So the answer is not clear. So what we do is run this regression, performance, firm performance of different kinds. Look at homophily, religion, varna, jati. And Rohan, I'm happy to share all the religion information with you. In fact, happy to share the paper that we have, where religion is also there with the 50-page online appendix also, but happy to share all. So, and then we control, Professor Chandrasekharan, like you asked, stuff related to firm characteristics, which is time bearing, and the board characteristics like board size, and number of percent of independent directors, etc. Industry fixed effects, time fixed effects, and other stuff. And we get a negative impact on different.
What is this industry fixed? Just fixed effects?
Industry fixed effects would mean that our results should be interpreted within an industry for a particular year. They should be interpreted according to that. They're not these results are not varying across industries. For a particular, we're controlling for the fact that a firm belongs to. If there is any particular thing that is disturbing the industry, we are controlling for that. It's not because of that impact.
Okay, but suppose if a firm is in multiple industries, like
no, that is not possible. That's not going to be possible in our data set. So every firm has an NIC code. So we look at that NIC code. We don't go down to that NIC. We look at NIC 2 and we stop there.
You don't take the diversification classification, like 90% of revenue related diversification, 70.
That would mean a group. That's an identity of a group. So we don't look at groups per se. A firm could belong to a group, but a firm also belongs only to a particular NIC code, an industry. So negative coefficient.
Just one point. Have you tried the specification with industry year fixed effects as a pair? And the reason is that if you go back to your initial graphs where you show the homophily across time, it normalizes around 2009. And that's because there was, you have the crisis, the financial crisis, most likely. And these shocks could be industry specific, right? And plus clustering, as we know from the network literature, is very micro, fine-grained, and is based, as Gaurav was suggesting, on trust and all these factors. So maybe industry year fixed effects could be a more ideal specification than an industry or just a year fixed effect, given the way it's structured in your.
So point well taken. One comment, we would have loved to do that. Which econometrician would not want that? And the only reason which we couldn't do it is because we lose out on data, and the cells are too tiny if we cluster according to G and T. So clustered, not clustered, but if we control for IJT, then or let's say look at industry and year fixed effects, then the amount, we are not able to conduct the regressions because many bins remain empty. So that we won't get anything. I mean, as a theoretician, that's the best that I can do to explain to you, but I think you understand what I mean, that we can't run that regression. Yeah, so, but we control for certain time varying industry characteristics. Like if we can, because that's also a comment well taken, that that things could change. So we look at a number of firms in an industry over time. We look at average capital of an industry over time. So control for many characteristics of as many as we can control for over time for industry, but we can't do but yeah, I want to bring to your notice that though we have negative impact, but please, negative significant coefficients, please don't take these seriously. Why? Because this is endogenous. This regression can be, there could be reverse causality here. Surely homophily can have an impact on performance. But performance can also have an impact on what kind of board of directors are picked, and hence can have an impact on the homophily of the board of director. Not to say that there are other missing variables also which could impact homophily as well as performance of a firm. For example, some rule regulation which is beyond, which is time varying for an industry. IJT, which we haven't captured here. So there is a problem here. So we need to address that endogeneity problem. And we do that with several empirical strategies. One of them is the one which I was mentioning. I don't want you to go through all of the stuff written here, but clause 49 is one of is a requirement which required people to firms to change the composition of the directors by 50% must be independent if the chair is executive, 33 otherwise. And this was done in a staggered fashion. It was announced in 2000, then some of them were required to do it in 2002, and then they listed that, okay, the ones which have which are of a particular firm size are supposed to do it by 2004, and then so on and so forth. So we use this instrument, which is that if they are below this particular threshold, that means they're required to comply, and they haven't yet complied, we use that instrument and use it to look at firms which are there before and after. And that instrument is quite strong. These are just snapshots of the results. So this is the first stage results of the IB, and the second stage basically say that we control, like looking at that instrument, controlling for that instrument, like using that instrument, we get negative and significant impact. What does it basically say that if we were one way of controlling for this endogeneity, firm performance is negatively impacted by homophily. There are other ways to do it. Instead of looking at the homophily of the directors itself of a firm, what we say is that the directors of the firm can be substituted. One instrument is the average homophily of directors of that industry. Because in any case, you pick up directors from that industry itself, or it could be just the average homophily of directors in that state. So we do that as well. And then here, this is the first stage regression for state homophily and sector homophily, and you can see that the FSAT is quite large. And again, here are these negative results for the regression on performance and homophily. So there could be, typically more.
One second.
Yes.
If we can go back to the result, Tobin's Q, will age of the firm and assets would be a criteria? Would it have influence? Tobin Q values
Yeah.
Was that the age of the firm could be a criteria which you considered, or the
Age.
age of the
So we
asset
control for
or-
that. We control for that. I think this should be actually positive, but I don't know why it's negative. But yeah, it should be positive because Tobin's Q in our other, oh no, that's volatility. No, fine. Yeah, volatility. Tobin's Q is fine. It should be negative. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We control for the age. You had a question, Rohan?
Yeah, I had an observation. So if you go back to your first approach where you try to do the interactions, so you're sort of using a staggered instrument, and the F-stat is sort of around 10, suggests that it seems that if you use a pre and post 2000 as a interactive term along with your thresholds, right, of compliance, it is not very strong. But as soon as you change it to some average share and instrument, use that as instrument instead, the F-stat shoots up. So it suggests that maybe a better strategy for in order to control endogenous is a Bartik instrument. So you could think about this like this. So you have data from 1990 to 2015. You can think about diversity being sort of related to your on a historical basis. So you use the initial time period shares and interact that with differences between a time period post 2000 and pre 2000. It's a classic Bartik instrument, right?
Yeah.
And I think you could then combine both in one instrument. Because right now, what it seems that if you use a staggered approach based on threshold of compliance, it's not really working. It's pretty much on the rule of thumb. But then if you go and use initial shares, which is actually one component of the Bartik instrument or the average shares, it is shooting up. So it seems that it's historically dependent or path dependent. Just an observation.
Point well taken. And our reviews also mentioned that it might be better to do an RDD kind of an approach instead of an
Bartik is actually an RDD across time, but it allows you to, suppose if you don't have very fine-grained data, say if your frequency is very broad.
But you look at it a big data bucket. Exactly,
yeah.
That's what we do.
So suppose you have quarterly data or something like that, then it's easy to do an RDD. Right?
Yes.
Because you have enough observations on either side. If you have yearly data, it becomes difficult. So Bartik sort of compensates for that.
It precisely with a heavy heart, we had to do this exercise. We did that too. I'm going to share the results with you with respect to that as well in the paper, that our final version of the paper, where we have this so-called bucketing, and we call it the RDD approach, not RDD, but yeah, I mean, RDD approach as well, and we get something different. But thank you for that, pointing that out, that this doesn't seem to be quite solid on grounds, but that approach should do that. So we do that as well, or somewhat, but happy to hear about how to improve it later on. And then I just wanted to show you, I mean, why should board of directors have an impact on firm performance? And we don't have solid results here because, information and data is not that solid, is sparse. It could be that diverse boards lead to better performance because they have better advisory role or because they monitor better. And poor board group dynamics could be the reason of boarded diverse firms that they lead to more conflict, etc. So what is it that is working? What we broadly get is that the homophilous boards tend to meet more often. So something like, if you're of my own kind, I'm more likely to get along with you and hence more likely to interact with you. But I will like you to take these results with a pinch of salt, only indicative, and hence probably indicative of better group dynamics of less diverse boards. Some stuff here that attendance of directors of board of directors whose top jati is the same as that of the jati of the board is higher than those of the others. It's basically saying that if I'm in a diverse board, if I identify with the jati which is the dominant jati of the board, then I'm more likely to attend these board meetings, saying that probably the group dynamics is much better here for less diverse boards.
Because I guess even within a board, you can have groups within the board itself, especially if you have a larger board. And the groups are, you're saying, likely to be dominated by the dominant jati in the board.
Yeah, and so I'm just trying to identify what is the reason why firms which are more diverse perform better, or what's happening, what's the dynamics there. So we don't find, I mean, we're handicapped for data. We would have ideally liked to know about the advisory role of board of directors, known which of them are advisory, monitoring rules. So looking at committees, and looking at monitoring committees and looking at their attendance, their frequency of meeting, their judgments, etc. So that's just about getting there now. Post 2015, we're getting more information. Otherwise, we don't have that information. So I'll skip all of this. And this was something which was asked, which was that how does the CEO's jati in firm dominant caste relate? And we find that if the CEO's jati is the same as that of the board of directors, then the homophily is actually on the whole more. So you trying to say that, some kind of a bhaichara, that you will say that, people of the same kind flock together. So I'll just quickly wrap up, and I'll just wrap up by saying that boards of large Indian firms have low cultural and mindset diversity. This homophily varies with firm characteristics, as I've shown, and it also adversely affects firm performance. And trying to allude to the fact that if it was to be taken up by the corporate MCA or by the government, then what we would like to tell them is that there are different ways of looking at diversity, measuring diversity, and do not narrow your lens by looking only at gender. There are other ways. At no cost are we recommending any kind of reservation on the boards, but just mentioning that there are different ways of looking at mindset diversity. All right.
I would like to respond to you on your observation there. See, today, gender diversity, whether it is MCA or SEBI guidelines, one women director for companies more than 1,000 crores doesn't speak anything. If you really ask me, the pool of available women directors themselves is low, according to me. Okay, MCA data can show. One. Second, I am not even clear whether the intent is serious at all. Whether they are looking at, it should be something relating to the composition and what it is required. For example, a logistics and supply chain company can hardly expect a women director because there are not many professionals in that domain itself. Whereas for a technology company, I can easily expect them to do much better. Okay, so from that angle, even if you see the pool of available and gender-based diversity, I think still we have a long way to go, is my view. I think even there, I would not even have to have a reservation. I think they have to promote and definitely look at it. And also to knock off executive directors, I think we have to look at the composition of non-executive, nominee director, investor representative, independent directors. That pool diversity is very important, because if at all anyone who can influence decision making on a board, only that pool, and not, I'm sorry to say, I still treat it as a academic conversation. Executive directors hardly do play any role, and they always, I think, one of your large firms having better performance. I would like to also relate with the age of the executive directors on the board. Age meaning not the physical age, how long they have been with the company on the board in a key decision-making level. Had they been a KMP or somebody to influence the board, most of them are not truly independent to drive advisory roles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I would one point about this independence is that even the so-called independent directors are not necessarily independent, right? And because, but they're, I mean, one cannot go down to the nitty-gritties. I mean, there's only so much that you can control. But I completely agree with you that much of this law at this point in time is only doing lip service but the intent is not there. And however, I do know, or at least was aware, that Kotek committee, when Raghu, or this person Subbu, our ex economic advisor, was a part of it, had had recommended that we should have one female director who's also independent, because most of the times Ambanis will put in their their own wives or people from their own family, not really representing ideas or interests from different places.
I am really happy to listen to your study, and I think from policy perspective, there is a lot need to be done. For example, whether it is an MCA list of directors or IICA's list of directors, whichever the database available, there is hardly any view available with the decision makers, or we don't get any data. How many of them are really, see, for example, your simulation is based on the character that there is a market opportunity. I still feel India is long way for market opportunity directors. It is only through network.
Absolutely.
And that's what your study says. It is jatis or varnas and religions which drive board membership, which is not healthy to be a trustee. Okay,
yeah, but I must say one thing, that we do not find that it's only one kind of varna or one kind of jati that is homophilous. It's across boards.
Yeah.
Across, and in fact, I must at this point in time, this point in the discussion, also refer to you of our study where we look at mergers between board of directors of similar castes. And we find that they're more likely to merge together. Now, first instinct, when we wrote a public interest article on Forbes outside and it was posted on Twitter, it just basically caused an uproar. I was not on Twitter at that point in time, but I got trolled. Anyway, so what I wanted to say is that it's not that the same. We're seeing that firms who are dominated by high class or high caste merge together. No, all kinds merge together, are more likely to merge together of their own kind. Now that speaks something. I mean, we're not talking about discrimination, at least in that study, neither here. And we are talking about homophily with respect to your own caste together. So there are perverse effects of doing that, as we see that here, but there could be advantages as well of merging and being together, merging together at the same time. Some network benefits are also there. But anyways, this is all left for further study.
No, my hunch is that there is definitely a bias in wealth creation, and especially through holdings through friends, relative, funds, corporate bodies, which are all very difficult to relate with the data available. Yeah. But I think public interest, since you are taking interest on to promote it through public interest, this is pretty interesting. I think at least someone should speak about all this, because if you see regulated industries, like whether you call it as a sugar or other industries or power distribution, you can definitely see the influence.
That's
again, those companies which are taken over through assorted assets.
Yeah.
All this is anyway. Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thank you. Same here.
Thank you, Professor Nagarajan. Any other questions? Gaurav has a question. Great.
Yeah, no, I had a question about this. So what you all were talking about with respect to using an RDD type strategy on the basis of the comments that you got during the review process. So how exactly did you go about implementing it? So, for example, I understand that to apply one of these strategies, you need some sort of forcing variable. So, in that case, in your instance, what was that?
That forcing variable was this: when you were ineligible and the law asked you to comply. So look at firms who were ineligible, who did not comply, who did not meet that minimum requirement of executive directors, and by the time that they were supposed to comply, then that is that threshold. And then look at firms look at them before and after, but it was not possible to do that, as Rohan was mentioning. So we had to look at the whole bunch before and after, and we had to, that's how.
Because the criterion was a multi-dimensional criterion, right? I mean, it wasn't just like a single, more than this or less than this. It was, you got to meet this, or you got to meet this, or you got to
No. It was just that you have to have 50% directors, which are executive. That was, you have to have that. If your CEO is not promoter, and if it was a promoter, and if it was non-promoter, then 30% executives.
33%. But in any case, that's a binary criterion.
The criteria is duality, chairman and CEO being the same. 50% criteria is duality, chairman and CEO being the same.
No, but in any case, I mean, the point is that, I mean, we don't have continuity in your variable. So, I mean, I don't know much about these methods, but from what little that's why I'm trying to picture what exactly is going
continuity. Yeah. So, as far as I remember, what we did was that we looked at directors in the same way that, if you were independent, irrespective of whether it was whether you were directly executive or non-executive, just looking at the rule and thinking about whether that rule applies to you or not at that point in time, and then looking at all of those before and after, I mean, to be honest, it's fuzzy to me too, to be honest, but happy to share and go back and share with you, because it took quite some time for us also to understand what we're doing, but
it would be very nice if you could share the paper. I would love to take a look at the.
I will just do that right away.
The reason being is that your data is pretty obvious. It has, as I said, a fuzzy rule with multiple layers. So I think a Bartik instrument would give you more power. Right now, I feel that you're losing power because you're sort of split two components precisely because of this fuzziness.
Yeah. So I'm going to share that with you, and if we get back with negative response, I'm going to change what we did with what you recommend.
Yeah, there's an ER paper that has come out, Goldman, Pickham Smith, which actually just breaks down the theory behind a Bartik instrument.
When was this?
2020 AER.
Oh, I see. We didn't know this.
So I just basically I developed an instrument for one of my papers about 6 years back. But I had to do a lot of gymnastics because I had to collect the data myself. This paper sort of made it so easy for me theoretically because I already developed the theory myself, but then I had a validation. So I think it would be great for you as well to take a look.
Okay, I'm going to share this paper with you, and please share with me that AER 2020 as well.
Definitely, will do.
Okay, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manaswini.
Thank you.